Hello and welcome to another episode of the AutoGuide Show. This week we talk about nothing less than one of the biggest new car launches of the year, some interesting new reveals in the news, and a whole bunch of hybrid sports cars, supercars, hypercars, all over the place. But first, a word from our sponsors.
eBay has reinvented car buying. From click to curb, everything is covered. With their new secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car, it's where you buy it start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery, it's all built in. And eligible vehicle purchases are backed by up to $100,000 in protection. This is what modern car buying looks like. Get your next ride on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure Purchase is powered by Carmel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. This week, Greg is subbing in for Mike, who is out on the road because that's happening a lot in this final quarter of the year. And to that point, we're going to kick things off by talking about a vehicle I drove 3 times in the last 2 weeks. I am talking about the 2026 Toyota RAV4, which is now all hybrid. The plug-in hybrid is back, and it has a new GR Sport model. And I drove this in both Canada, where it is built, and in the US, which is where it's also built, although I didn't drive by the factory there.
I mean, it's a hugely important crossover. It is among the best-selling vehicles in North America. By some counts, it was the best-selling vehicle last year. If you take out certain things and slice and dice the F-Series different ways than perhaps Ford and Automotive News and others do it, but hugely important vehicle. I really am curious to hear what you think. I mean, does it measure up?
So, I'm going to damn it with a little bit of faint praise here.
As all auto journalists do, right?
It is better than the vehicle that it replaced in nearly every way. If listeners or viewers head to AutoGuide.com, you can see a bunch of coverage pieces from us on this. I did talk about 2 ways that it maybe isn't better than the outgoing model. But yeah, mostly better, although it's very frustrating that no one is talking price yet because we need to know exactly where it lands to really get an idea of it. I don't think it's the best vehicle in the segment, though. I didn't think that of the existing model either. But I make the comparison to McDonald's. Okay. I'm sure you have a favorite burger in your neighborhood, and so do I. And I'm willing to bet it's probably not McDonald's.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And yet I don't think McDonald's cares. I don't think McDonald's is like, oh, darn, we're not the best hamburger. They're the best-selling hamburger, far and away. And I think that's kind of where this is, where it is good in so many ways, and it's never the worst in the segment at anything. And so that's why it's so appealing to so many people, right? It does everything good or better.
Yeah, so almost like maybe like a Culver's or a Shake Shack, like, maybe a little better than McDonald's or Wendy's, but not quite the neighborhood pub or something, And I'm curious too. What are your top 1 or 2 in the segment? Since we've opened this can of worms, let's go down it.
I drove one of my favorites to the Canadian event. I drove the Hyundai Tucson hybrid.
Okay.
I love how it looks. I think the Kia Sportage hybrid, which is very similar, I think that's slightly nicer inside than the Tucson, and it drives a little bit better, but the styling is, up to everyone's personal taste. I prefer the Hyundai look.
Interesting. Okay. But still up there, kind of mid to top of class then.
Oh, yeah. And I think what's interesting with the RAV4, especially with going all hybrid, you're losing out on the more off-road oriented trims of before, like the TRD models. They're gone. There is this Woodland, which is pictured here, and it drives very similarly to the outgoing model in the sense that it's like just a little squidgier. But I think that'll appeal to most folks. But if you're looking to take it properly off-roading, it's not going to be the choice. It doesn't have any additional underbody cladding. Something like a Forester Wilderness is probably still my pick if I was staying in this segment. And one of the things that I found most interesting about the RAV4, the new one, and I will admit all of these were pre-prod models, right? They're pre-productions. Some things may change very slightly for production models, but the interior just doesn't feel special enough for me, especially in the limited. Lower trims, I'm fine with it, but the limited is still pretty plasticky inside, whereas especially the Koreans and then Mazda do a really good job of making a swanky interior, right? And that just doesn't feel like the case for me here. And maybe that's, I mean, not maybe, that's definitely intentional. I feel like Toyota is targeting more of a Forester kind of buyer, right? Someone who doesn't want the fanciest interior because they don't want to risk damaging it. This is a family vehicle. You don't want to muck it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are really playing the hits here. They're going for volume. Like, it does seem like the off-road and outdoorsy theme is, it's very top of mind for a lot of consumers. Maybe not for this market though. So just going all hybrid, bringing the plug-in, which I think is a really interesting play. And then the GR Sport, or whatever they're calling it, the GR model, that's cool too. I think it's a different take on the segment than what you're seeing where like Honda, Subaru, everybody's trying to make their baby like off-roader type thing. And whether it actually ever goes off-road or even has any additional capability, that seems academic. So Toyota's like, we're not going to play that game with this segment, even though they legitimately could, like TRD Pro, hello, like they could do that. But would that really fit? I don't know. I think at that point we'd be looking at like when Chevy was slapping SS's on Malibus and things like that. So I kind of like what they're doing, the way they sort of fine tune the lineup here. But I guess that's a good segue to the GR Sport.
It is, yeah. So I also want to add for all of the 26 RAV4s, they are running the 5th gen hybrid powertrain. Sorry, 6th gen for the plug-in, if I'm not mistaken. And so it is just quieter. I think the move to all hybrid makes a lot of sense, and the impact this will have on fleet economy and fleet pollution is massive, right? I mean, they sell 500,000 of these things across the US and Canada every year. So going all hybrid is incredible. And the sheer logistics challenge of doing that is impressive. So talking about the GR Sport, it is the new trim for this year, and it is only available with the plug-in hybrid powertrain, but also gets a power boost. So you're looking at 324 horsepower in a RAV4.
That's like a hot hatch, legit.
yeah, it's kind of wild, and it's a very front biased system, but nonetheless, I mean, it's quick, and it isn't just a badge job, because I don't know about you, but that was one of my concerns, right? Are we diluting a brand that has done a lot for enthusiasts and fairly affordable levels of performance too? Nope, this actually does have some unique stuff, some stuff that has been optimized by GR engineers to make it just a little sharper. And sure enough, against something like an XSE, this is just a little more engaging. I don't know if it's necessarily the most engaging vehicle in this segment, but like I was saying earlier, I don't think that matters. I think it's the most engaging RAV4, and it initially kind of stumped me as to who it was for, and by the end, no, it made sense. It's for dads. It's for dads who missed the TRD Camry and now want an SUV, and they want one that looks fun and also provides a little bit of fun when you aren't shuttling the kids all over the place.
Yeah, this reminds me a little bit of the like different segment and different price point, but the Chevy Tahoe thing with like the police like brakes and the up level 6.2 liter. They're just like, they're going for it. And it's sort of like for the, like the dad who wishes he still had a Chevy SS or a Camaro, but it's like, hey, you need something that you could put the dog and the kids in. And, hey, makes sense. And I mean, more horsepower than the Mazda Speed 3 back in, 10, 15 years ago. So, hey, that's a lot of power. When I saw that figure, I was like, they're really going for it here.
Yeah. And while there are a few other plug-in hybrids in this segment, none of them have that much power or this much range. This will do, I mean, the GR will do 50 miles. You can get a little bit more with different trims and a little bit less with others. That's a lot of range to go on just EV power. And it has 200 horsepower from the electric motor at the front. So you can easily do just about everything without needing to wake up the gas engine. So it's a very well-rounded package. Again, I'm concerned about price. But yeah, it's fascinating. And like you said, it's such a major event this year that's why we needed to drive it multiple times. I went to both launches, and then I also drove it at Ajax Test Fest very briefly. Before we move on, Greg, I know we're kind of spending a lot of time on the RAV4, but I just want to point out one of the other aspects of the vehicle that I really enjoy is the updated infotainment. It is a whole new one. Arene? Arene? Yeah, I want to say it's Arene is how it's pronounced. Is Toyota's new infotainment. It takes the basis of the old one and it adds more of a tile main menu, which is a lot easier to deal with. It's also a bigger screen. It has more computing power, so it's faster. The voice assistant is quicker to respond. If you have a plug-in and you use the native navigation, it can route you based on where chargers are, which is a nice touch. Overall, I found it a solid update over a system that is solid, but maybe a little too bare bones, the existing one. So this is good. And easily my favorite feature is the built-in dash cam. I love that. I love that brands are doing this. Hyundai did it with the Palisade earlier this year, and you can access everything directly in the infotainment. It can be set to auto record if it senses any incidents like traction control issues. And because it's native, you are getting turn signal indicators, you're getting your speed, your current location, and these are all 30-second clips or minute clips that you can then download. But they're stored only on the car, which I think is a nice, important security note too. They're not beamed up to the cloud. So yeah, I love that feature, and it is standard on every RAV4.
That's cool. That's cool. Very modern, very of the times.
So moving on to this week's news, and we're going to start with something that Mike caught at the beginning of the week. Infiniti is teasing a R-spec version of, well, they only have SUVs, but it's their biggest SUV, the QX80.
I mean, I drove the QX80 this summer, and it makes a statement. It's huge. It's, I think, back to like what Infiniti sort of should be, especially when they were really rolling with like Shiro Nakamura and some of their sedans with the big, the V8. But hey, this is giving them a little more guts, I guess. It's certainly not necessary in their lineup, but I mean, this is kind of, we mentioned how Toyota is slicing and dicing their RAV4. If Infiniti is going to mainly be SUVs right now, and they got to kind of add some extra things. So I think this makes sense. And this is what buyers in this price point, more is more. When you have a huge SUV and, you just more is more. It helps them better compete with Mercedes and BMW.
Yeah, I agree. I think the QX80, it's not my cup of tea, but it does what it's meant to do very well. And it makes a statement. It's also, I mean, if we've learned anything from the American brands, big body-on-frame luxury SUVs print money. So why not offer buyers a more exclusive option? And knowing that the Armada Nismo is coming, you can't have Infiniti not have a performance model. It would seem unfair. So, yep, tons of sense. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Moving on, sticking to performance SUVs. So I actually paired off two stories here. I'm just gonna swap back and forth for viewers here.
There we go.
So it is the 2026 Ford Mustang Mach-E California Special, and then also the 2026 Porsche Macan GTS. Both of these are just more enthusiast-oriented versions of existing EV SUVs.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm picking one, I really like the California Special treatment for the Mach-E. I've always, over the years, liked the California Special versions of the Mustangs. Generally, you see them more like the coupes and the convertibles. But this I think dresses the Mach-E up. It gives it a little bit of a different vibe. I like some of the graphics, the color scheme. It reminds me a little bit of I don't know, a few years ago, they showed one in Wimbledon white, and that was like an anniversary edition. And I think Ford sometimes does a nice they do a really good job of playing to their heritage. And I think it's good that they're doing that with the Mach-E a little bit. I think at times you get in the Mach-E and it is a crossover and it doesn't really feel like a Mustang. And I think they could do some things like this to make it feel a little more of that Mustang vibe, sort of like what they do, I think, actually quite better with the Bronco Sport. I think the Bronco Sport feels way more like a Bronco than the Mach-E does for a Mustang for obvious reasons. But and I like all of the vehicles I just mentioned, but I like that one. I think it's a good, nice treatment.
Yeah, I'm with you. I really enjoy the Mach-E. I realize that now it's starting to seem a little old, and yet every time I get into one, it still drives really nicely. It doesn't drive like a Mustang, fair, but against a lot of the other EV SUVs, it does have a distinctly more eager vibe that I enjoy. And yeah, the California specials have looked good on Mustang GTs. Now it'll work on this GT pack. And then similarly, I mean, it's right there in the headline. The Macan GTS models have been the sweet spot for Porsche brands or Porsche models for, decades at this point.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's just below the turbo in price and performance, but you get all the things that everyone puts on their options list anyway. Just standard.
I think that's a good way to kind of make this car just a crossover, a little more interesting, engaging. I think the GTS nomenclature has a fair amount of, brand cachet with Porsche loyalists, especially, but like as enthusiasts, we know what it means. So I think it's a logical step. And the last few times I've been in the Macan, I've generally liked it. So I think this is it's a little bit of a sleeper in the Porsche lineup for obvious reasons, because it's not the 911, it's not even the Cayenne, but I think it's a very solid product. So another good move for Porsche.
Yeah, I'm with you. When Mike and I drove the Macan 4 and the Macan Turbo earlier this year, the Turbo, I mean, it was very quick, right? But it was so expensive that it was hard to justify. And this feels a little like I get everything I want. I get the sharper responses, but I don't need 630 horsepower.
Fair enough.
So, other reveal this week, which I think a lot of us really enjoy, except then we know that it's not coming here. Toyota has brought back the FJ, or I guess to give it its full name, the Land Cruiser FJ, but it is a smaller, cuter version of the Land Cruiser. That's really all I can say.
Yeah, I think they should, frankly, bring the FJ back. I think there's still a bit of a cult of enthusiasts who like that. I think there's other brands that are doing stuff like Scout, who we'll talk to. Rivian's got a bit of an off-road outdoorsy theme. I think there's room. And at one point in the Toyota lineup, they did have the 4Runner, the Land Cruiser, and the FJ Cruiser all at once. Was it overkill? Well, yeah, it probably was. And that's why the FJ was the first one to go overboard. But I mean, that's sort of my hot takes. I actually think they do have room to build like it was like a 3-door technically, kind of coupe. Bring it back. It can't be the small, obviously. The way they've positioned the current Land Cruiser would be problematic, just because when they had all three of them, the Land Cruiser was more or less like a Grand Wagoneer or something competitor, bigger, much bigger vehicle. So they would have some, like, their product planners and marketers would have their work cut out for them. But I always really like the FJ Cruiser. I see a bunch of them around town. You see a ton of them on the AutoGuide listings. I'll give a plug for that. And they really hold their value well. They were something unique. And if you actually look at the lineup of what Toyota has, like, do they have like a real 2-door Wrangler competitor right now? Not really. When you look at like all the 4-door versions that they have, these are like bigger SUVs. So I don't know. I would say it's not my money. It's Toyota's. So I'd spend it.
I think where you're going with this, I agree, because I was just saying with the RAV4, there isn't, the TRD models are gone, right? And it's like, that does leave a bit of a gap, because if you want something from Toyota and you want to actually go do real off-roading things, your choice is a 4Runner now. Like, you don't have anything smaller than that. And so maybe Toyota is just kind of making space now. This is based off the Hilux platform, so I don't know if maybe that's the limiting factor, is maybe it can't come to the US or Canada because it's not federalized. I think it looks great. It takes the Land Cruiser styling. It's very narrow, which I appreciate, because as anyone who has done a decent amount of off-roading will tell you, it's sometimes the width that is more of a problem than anything. So this looks nice and narrow, funky. It has a really cool back-end treatment that kind of looks like a big porthole. And it has a little electric scooter that they're concepting to go along with it. I just think this is the sort of fun thing that we really need. And I understand that it's going to more developing markets, but maybe we can get something along this flavor in a few years, because as you pointed out, used FJs aren't getting any cheaper.
Don't you love when they do the throw-in like scooters for these reveals? For a while it was drones and scooters and bikes, so I always like the random things. And sometimes when Jeep will do like a reveal, maybe the Jeep concept is obviously just a concept, but they're like, oh no, we're going to sell this bike at like REI or somewhere. And so pretty intrigued about the scooters too.
Yeah. So one other thing about this, it will be at the Japan Mobility Show, which we will be at. So I am very excited to poke around it and see what it's all about.
Hands-on, get some pictures. I want to hear more about this thing.
Yeah. So look forward to it in a future episode and article. All right. Moving on to nice light subject matter. We are talking tariff relief. Greg, you wanna take it away?
Well, it's just sort of like the latest, news hit beat in the Trump administration's like seemingly daily tariff changes. It's interesting because it's like 25% tariffs on medium and heavy duty trucks, and then 10% on buses. But then this is where it gets a little nuanced. They're going to serve up almost 4%, 3.75 rebate on U.S. vehicles, and this is through 2030. So Ford and GM have basically said they seem to like this move, but it also, I think, sort of complicates the whole tariff situation. It's pretty confusing. So we'll see how it plays out. Heavy duty trucks are sort of they're like a highly profitable part of the market. Sales are usually very consistent because like OEMs and like generally their customers, like there's like established cycles. Like, these trucks last almost forever. And then there's like a sort of expected replacement period. So interesting to see how it plays out. It's another kind of interesting segment that I will say this, it doesn't seem like you really need to throw tariffs on here, but I mean, that's really going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. It's very odd to me to introduce a rebate on top of a tariff instead of maybe just lowering the tariff. I also find it really optimistic that they think this is going to run through 2030. But
true. Yeah, that's a good point.
But anyway, I'm sure we'll have more updated tariff news, well, pretty much daily, like you said. Yeah. So, moving on to other industry news, not reveals, and I think this is going to be met with about as much joy as the last piece. GM is doubling down on its move to remove Apple CarPlay and Android Auto from its infotainment. Currently, it is limited to just the EVs, and the Lyric actually still has it. But moving forward, nothing will have either of the popular smartphone pairings.
I don't get it. I just don't. Like, I mean, I've used Android Auto. Some of the best applications of Android Auto have been at GM vehicles. It just works. You pair your phone. I had a Google Pixel for a while until, in fact, I think I still have it. My wife uses it as like her backup kind of like phone workout thing. And it worked great. To me, this is like introducing a problem to a question that nobody asked. Like everybody likes Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and it seems like they're trying to do the thing where they're like, well, no, we have a better solution for you. And people don't like that. People don't like when you sort of tell them like, hey, we have this better solution when you don't want that solution. So I don't know. It seems overcomplicated, which again, this feels like they're stubbing their toe here because their integrations between phones and their vehicles using Android Auto specifically, because GM always seems to be more Android than Apple, have been very good. And I actually think their infotainment systems have made some strides in recent years. Like the navigations are good, the turn-by-turn directions work. They're not the best, but they're not the worst as far as using the buttons and the touch screen. But like it's a competitive thing. It's not like when we were talking before about previous generations of Toyota infotainment systems that were like, ugh.
Yeah.
So GM, I think, is in a good place, and this is just kind of like unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of comments about this. I reached out, or rather, colleagues reached out to me on social media. We were chatting about this when the news dropped, and I agree that GM's infotainment its native system is one of the better ones, and I understand from an OEM's perspective, especially with EVs, where you would want to kind of guide people to use your native navigation as opposed to, say, Google Maps off your phone, because the native system can read the car's battery health, its current temperature, all those things, and it can give you routes based on optimal charging or what have you. I understand that reasoning for the EVs. And if you have a really good infotainment system, people aren't going to miss something like CarPlay or Android Auto. But to your point, you're removing a choice. And I feel like that is the tough pill that GM is swallowing here is you're forcing people into something that maybe they don't want to do. And I realize as journalists, we complain like, oh, there's no CarPlay, but we get into new cars on a regular basis. If you own this, it's far more likely that you're going to get the apps that you want, like your music streaming or podcast or audio novel apps. You're going to log in on the car once and you'll never think about it again. So you get most of the functionality of your phone. But it's just, our lives are on our mobile devices, all of us. So I think it's just a matter of wanting that separation, right? I don't want my car to have all my login info. I want it on my phone in one spot, and I want to then beam it onto my screen in the car.
No, that's very true. And I would also even say too, like if you have multiple people driving cars in your household, maybe you don't, yes, you own the car, you set it up. It's different than us journalists who maybe want to get in and kind of grab and go. But like, I'll drive my wife's car and it's like, would I rather just plug in my phone or have it just pair with Apple CarPlay? Absolutely. Versus messing up whatever settings she has, because it's like, this is maybe the one time this week I'm driving this thing. I'll just do Apple CarPlay. Boom, away we go, versus messing with the whole native infotainment system. So again, it's just sort of like, you mentioned McDonald's earlier in the show, like don't tell people they can't have their burger and fries every now and then. This is, a pretty simple system that almost everybody uses. So, and I think it's kind of telling that nobody else is like, hey, we're going to kill off Apple CarPlay and Android Auto because we think we have something better,
Yeah, that's a great point. This is unique, but we'll see how it plays out. All right, moving on. We're sticking with GM. I managed to get a very fun comparison in this year against with two hybrid sports cars. The world we live in 2025. So I had the Corvette E-Ray and the Porsche 911 GTS, both of which have electrified powertrains in very different ways. And it was nearly 1,200 horsepower combined. It was definitely a fun week, and it illustrated some very different facets of these vehicles. I did not expect to like the Corvette as much as I did, but it is now a very pricey vehicle. It's easily the biggest jump from a regular version of a vehicle to a hybrid. The price gap is huge. And when you're playing in this category, some of the shortcomings of the E-Ray start to become a lot more noticeable.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds like a real tough week here. Corvette versus 911. What a week you had.
Yeah.
I love how the colors actually lined up too. That's spectacular.
Yeah, I lucked out there. So the E-Ray is in some ways the more advanced vehicle, right?
Yeah.
You can drive very short distances on electric power alone because the electric motor works on the front axle, which means when you're doing that, you're driving a front drive Corvette. It has more power. It has 655. We expect Corvettes to have more power than 911s, right? That's just a fact.
Table stakes.
Yeah, it is the smoother one to drive in the city, and that's for two reasons. One, the Porsche did not have a nose lift option, and it is the only 911 I have driven in my entire time at AutoGuide that didn't. So that was strange to me because living in the city, there are speed bumps, and I have to try and maneuver around them. The Corvette does have one. It's very good. And it also has the, I can never say the whole word because it's 20 some odd letters, the magnet dampers, the magnetic dampers. It has those. And
I don't even try to pronounce that properly. I actually just was looking at a CTSV listing here, which also probably had versions of those, earlier versions.
Yeah.
I digress.
And it gives it a pretty wide range of ride comfort. It is stiff. They're both pretty stiff, but it was the 911 that I actually had a harder time living with day to day. Whereas the Corvette, you can do it pretty well. And the interior, which has been a Corvette shortcoming for so long, is fantastic. This one had two-tone blue leather, which was a lot, but it really does feel like a quality item. And I love that the dashboard is pretty dramatic. It has these little fold-ups by the A-pillar that look kind of like the back of a BMW i8, and I mean that in the best way possible. I still don't like the big wall in the middle in the center console. I'm glad that's disappearing for next year because it just makes passengers feel like an afterthought, right? They're just glorified ballast at that point. They can't access the touchscreen. They can't touch anything. They're just off in their little corner. There were a lot of creaks and moans, though. That was something that I found to be a bit of a problem when you're spending, over $150,000 on a sports car. But largely, day-to-day, Corvette, fantastic.
Yeah. When you get into this territory, I feel like you're almost entering like professional athlete territory because you can, for like half the price easily, even less than that, for both these, get like as much Corvette or 911 as you will ever want or need. And you don't even have to approach this territory. But if you do want like the hybrid performance, which is what it is, this is certainly here for you. If you're, like Otani or somebody like that who wants to who has the money and, wants to spend money, or Justin Verlander is another guy who used to buy like a new sports car every year, it seemed like. But I digress.
And we're not even going to mention the Blue Jays, despite the colors of these cars.
I know. I was teeing it up for you. If you wanted to go there, I was teeing it up for you. That was my thought. But
they'll get one of these eventually, I'm sure. So really quickly on the 911, I should point out the hybrid system is a little different here. It has a electric turbocharger, which means that it has almost no turbo lag. It does have a small battery that is integrated into the transmission, so you get a little boost there. And basically, it just feels like this engine is just a large displacement version of an existing 911 engine. That's the thing, is it doesn't necessarily feel like a turbo. It just feels huge and capable and always ready to go. It's a very impressive package overall, but kind of like a lot of the 911s that I've driven the last few years, it almost feels too good. It's too polished, except for the ride, which is really stiff, but it is an excellent everyday vehicle, right? Because I have a useful front trunk. The visibility is fantastic, whereas it's terrible in the Corvette. And it's also weirdly good on gas. I know that that's not really a concern for people who are spending this level of money, but it's good to know. And this one had the larger fuel tank, so it has a range approaching 450 miles, 500 miles. You can do big distances in this thing. It handles sharper than the Corvette, and in a weird twist, this was actually a rear drive 911 too, so it has that added agility of not having a powered front axle. I think if money were no object, I would still go with the 911, but I find that the suspension just pushes it closer to GT3 category than I really expected. I wanted more of a blended everyday vehicle, like we were saying earlier, which is a hallmark of GTS models.
Yeah, I think they do walk the fine line with this one as far as making it, dare I say, a little too, aggressive as far as the setup. But I guess the market will determine, if this is the way to go or not.
We'll see. All right, and it's been a lot this week, I know, but we're on the last story here, which is another hybrid sports car.
Real tough summer it's been for you, Kyle.
It was. I shouldn't even call it a sports car. That feels insulting. It is a hypercar, supercar,
Yeah.
supercar,
Supercar for sure.
The 2025 Lamborghini Revuelto. Greg, I was a little intimidated knowing that I would get to drive this. It was my first. Oh man, I hope I don't offend the PR people. My first real Lamborghini. I drove the Urus last year, and it was really impressive to drive around LA because it does things that no SUV does. But I mean, you say Lamborghini, this is what people picture. They picture 100%. A brightly colored wedge. And to find out that it's going to be the first plug-in Lamborghini, it's 1,001 horsepower. It still has the V12. It ticked all the boxes. And it's like the 911. You have to be very careful where you drive this because the nose is impressively low. You know how Ford has the navigation system that tells you if your trailer will fit on certain roads? We need that, but for ground clearance for the Lamborghini. It's something like 4 inches.
It's interesting. I was in a McLaren this summer. We'll just really bouge up this segment here.
Yeah, why not?
It has a really good nose lifting feature. It'll auto sense, and also it's very easy because obviously this is a problem if you're driving a car like this, unless you're literally on a track, and even some tracks can get a little bumpy. You need this feature. Though one of the ironies, aside from it's an expensive fix, the motor's in the back. So it's not like if you curb it, you're going to crack an oil pan. You're just going to look like a fool. So there's a little bit of irony to that feature, but we don't want to break noses, human or cars. So you got to be able to raise the front end.
Yeah. So this one has a memory setting as well, which is really nice. And it can activate up to 70 kilometers an hour, which is impressive too, because that just meant I drove around the city with the nose lift active all the time because I don't know if there's going to be a bump or not coming. So that was one aspect of the vehicle. You can't go anywhere in something like this in brat green without people asking you questions, taking photos. My wife and I were heading for coffee the one morning, and we watched a group of teenagers literally jaws drop, point at the car, and track it as we went by.
Whoa.
And she laughed about how if she saw a group of kids do that in a movie, she'd say it was overacted. And yet, here we are in the real world. You are everyone's jester. You have to be the nicest person, which is fine. And I think one of the important things that I did with this vehicle is I shared it with as many people as I could, right? I went and visited nieces and nephews and gave them a short little rides around the block. That's what you have to do with these cars because let's be honest, that's why you're getting it. If you're spending this level of money, which is full on condo or house amounts of money, you are trying to make a statement. And while it does, I also just want to point out, it is incredibly comfortable and easy to drive. Way easier than I expected. Visibility out the back is basically non-existent. You just have engine and intakes. But beyond that, this thing is comfortable on the highway. The plug-in will do 10 miles of range or 10 kilometers, but I beat the official quote. When the engine wakes up, it scares everyone in a half-block radius. But I can't believe how friendly this vehicle was to drive. The Revuelto is really, I guess, kind of the ultimate evolution of the original NSX concept of this idea of you can have an exotic vehicle, but it doesn't mean you have to suffer for it. And that's what I witnessed, although I never got used to turn signals being on the steering wheel front. That was always something that was awkward for me.
Yeah. Lambo has some weird takes on some very basic driver mechanics. So I don't know. I mean, this is one I'd be interested to drive. The last couple Lambos I've driven have been kind of outliers. I drove the Urus, and that I really liked it, but it was so much like just an Audi and Lambo clothing. And I drove the Sterrato, which is, you don't have to worry about bumping the nose with that thing. It's a lifted, you're well off the ground. I was very confident. Like all the things that like actually make you nervous about driving like a supercar, like usually it's the visibility or the like just how hard it is necessarily. You really have to be on your toes. It's kind of erased in the Sterrato. So we'll have to do maybe a list of like, that could be a fun end of year list or something. Our experiences of the different Lambos or something. I drove a Countach once too, and that was also very challenging and intimidating to drive.
I can only imagine. Yeah. So overall, I mean, this is one of those pinch me moments, right? Where it's like, I've been doing this for many years, and to be able to get into like a V12 Lamborghini is a thing. And it lived up to the hype. Nice. Unsurprisingly, I guess, given the sheer cost of the thing, but wow. So I'm going to end it on that note. I know this has been a long news and reviews segment here on the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. But Greg and I are going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we are going to talk to Ryan from Scout Motors. And so we'll be right back.
eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. It's all thanks to their new secure purchase. Ever try to buy a car and end up in a parking lot with a stranger on some blind trust? Or spend half the day at a dealership talking to pushy salespeople and signing paperwork? Or maybe worst of all, wait hours at the DMV just to transfer the title? That era is over. For years, eBay has been the go-to for gearheads, collectors, and DIYers. Because whatever you're into, from classics to SUVs and trucks to imports, eBay's got it. And now with Secure Purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your next ride, it's where you can buy it, start to finish. Sellers and titles are verified, paperwork is handled by experts, and payments are traceable and digital, so you know exactly who you're dealing with and exactly what you're getting. Plus, you can finance, insure, and register your vehicle all in one place. No more hours at the dealership, no more trips to the DMV. Get your vehicle, plates, and paperwork shipped to your door ready to drive. And it's all part of one seamless process designed to feel as easy as buying anything else online. And eligible vehicles purchased on eBay are backed by up to $100,000 in purchase protection. Thinking about selling a ride? Secure Purchase makes that simple too, because you know your buyer and their funds are verified. If you still owe on your car, the financing payoff is fully integrated, so you're not chasing paperwork or waiting on checks to clear. And with Secure Purchase, you get paid fast, and you're not going to be stuck chasing no-shows or answering the 5th still available messages. This is what modern car buying looks like. Skip the DMV, skip the sketchy meetups. Buy it on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure Purchase is powered by Carmel Dealer Services, LLC, and eBay subsidiary.
And here we go. It's good.
All right, joining us now on the Auto Guide podcast is Ryan Decker. He is the Scout Motors Vice President of Strategy and Brand. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Glad to be here, guys.
All right. I figured, there's so much going on in the world, especially as it relates to EVs and what's going on with Scout. I figured you probably want to talk for half an hour about Virginia Tech football, right? I saw that's where you're from.
That's a sad and gloomy conversation at the moment. I'd rather not talk about that, Craig.
Well, you're talking to a guy who went to Michigan State, so we're in about the same boat as far as college football this fall. But
I can empathize then. I can empathize.
So why don't we start off by tell us a little bit about what got you into cars in the first place? What kind of, just give us a little bit of your mini origin story. Did you play with Hot Wheels? Just how did you get into this kind of crazy business?
I definitely grew up with a dad who loved to tinker. Usually it was on big bore American muscle car type stuff. but almost everything happened in my parents' driveway, much to my mom's chagrin, because I think he spilt oil like 4 or 5 times and it was impossible to get it out of the driveway. But we had a lot of fun over a lot of years, replacing brakes, replacing carburetors, everything from Datsun 240s to several generations of Mustangs, all took place in that driveway. That was the early years. That definitely transitioned into Virginia Tech. You brought that up, Greg. I did study mechanical engineering there. And a lot of that undergraduate engineering coursework was focused on automotive at the time. And that was a really exciting time because that's when autonomy was starting to sort of become a thing. That's when Formula One, Formula E was starting to pick up and bring some excitement to it. So just a really exciting time in automotive. My first job didn't pursue automotive. So I had a bit of a homecoming when in 2015, I finally got back into the automotive game, so to speak. And that's ultimately what led me towards Scout Motors.
Nice.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm curious, Scout Motors, it's obviously a relatively new company backed by Volkswagen. Our readers are very interested in it because I think obviously part of it is because of the history, going back to the I think we could call them iconic, vehicles from the 60s right up into the early 1980s. I'm curious, what attracted you about moving over to kind of a newer venture like Scout?
On the personal note, it was definitely the chance to build something from a complete clean sheet of paper, right? I viewed that as just a generational opportunity to build something. And like you said, Greg, to build something that has existing heritage, that has existing authenticity, and to build something that has the backing, the expertise, and the scale of the Volkswagen Group behind it, I did view it just as absolutely once in a lifetime. And the more you got into the details, the more you understood what Scout was, right? It was kind of the OG in the segment. It was a great vehicle, but beyond the vehicle, it was definitely this really inspiring community, this great brand. It stood for optimism. It stood for adventure, right? The chance to reimagine that was really special alone, but then the chance to sort of reimagine what those Scout products were, and they did some really cool things. Iconic design, sort of the OG of the SUV category, really rugged characteristics, really tactile characteristics. The opportunity to imagine that in a way that feels cool, exciting, modern, innovative was just something that you couldn't pass up on.
Yeah, I was going to ask, and it feels like you already kind of nailed it there, Ryan, but like how you're pretty unique in the EV space, or actually, I mean, in the broader automotive space for being a brand that is new, but also, yeah, balancing that with like decades of history, right? And history from a
Exactly.
brand that some people may not even remember ever seeing on the road. I've seen a handful, right? Like in terms of when they stop being sold. So how do you balance those two very different worlds?
Colin, it's a great question, and the first thing I want to address is just, I want to make sure we don't put Scout Motors in too much in this EV space box, because although we do have an electrified powertrain, we're also quite excited by our Harvester range extended powertrain. We love what that delivers from a customer perspective. We think it's a game changer in terms of technology, but we're also not shying away from the fact that the wheels, the drive units, are always powered by a battery. So it's just super exciting, great torque, great acceleration, but at the same time, having a total combined range that can do over 500 miles. We think that checks a lot of really, really interesting boxes from a customer perspective. Going back to the broader company question, I think the two words that I would anchor that conversation on are trust and enthusiasm. There have been a lot of new entrants, typically EV entrants, that have brought a lot of enthusiasm. They've been cool, they've been fast, they've been innovative, they've been entrepreneurial, but some of them have lacked a little bit of trust, so to speak. Some of them have had questions whether they'll be around next year or whether they're going to go bankrupt. Some of them have had questions, can they service my car, or am I going to have to wait 6 months to get an appointment? You can imagine there's been some questions on whether these new entrants will deliver. On the other hand, you have a lot of really strong incumbents who have been around literally for decades, hundreds of years. And they have some challenges, I would say, in just being perceived as sort of new and cool and exciting. And that's what Scout Motors has the opportunity to do, to really throw a dart right between those two. to be new, cool, exciting, innovative, modern, to sort of have a little bit of that scrappy American startup spirit, but to do it in a way that has the trust of having a large OEM behind us, which means, we have money. That's nice. But beyond money, we have expertise. We know how to build a factory. We know how to get good terms of trade and good pricing from suppliers. We know what we're doing here. And I think that's a very unique combination in automotive that hasn't really been seen before.
Interesting. You talk about, you mentioned the E-Rev, and I know originally you launched the company in 2022. It looked like it was going to be, all electric. And then you offer this sort of new opportunity. The market has certainly shifted in the last few years too. Things have changed, for a variety of reasons. Can you kind of tell us about that decision? And do you think it'll be a different customer for Scout, or just talk about this, extended range type of vehicle?
Yeah, Greg, I would say considerably might be a bit of an understatement on that. But I'll answer this through two dimensions. The first way is through the regulatory environment, and then the second way will be coming back to the customer perspective. And from a regulatory perspective, when Scout Motors was being conjured up in 2022, it was a very different environment. There was a federal regulatory landscape, and then there was the state regulatory landscape being driven by California and many other states that had very ambitious, very comprehensive emissions and electric vehicle targets that were out there. And so as a new company that would be selling products well into the 2030s, the decision was made to succeed in that regulatory environment. We had to go all electric. Obviously the regulatory environment significantly shifted. We'll come back to what that means for Scout. From a customer perspective, we're also paying very close attention to what's going on in the marketplace. The first thing I'll say is that the last time I checked, EV to EV loyalty is still a very high number.
It's still over 80%, meaning people who get behind the wheel of an electric car, they typically don't say, I hated this, I'm never going to buy one again. In fact, they do the opposite. And it's quite clear why, right? They get comfortable with range, they get comfortable with charging, they quite like the torque, they quite like the performance, they like the cost of ownership, on and on and on. But we're not naive, and we recognize that from a customer perspective, going all electric, not quite right for everyone during this stage. There is still some charging anxiety out there. There is still range anxiety out there. And so we thought that our range extender harvester solution was very interesting from that point of view. Now, what we like about it is it's still an electric vehicle first, meaning the battery is always driving the wheels. You can still do around 150 miles of all electric range. A lot of day-to-day driving will still be in all electric mode, which is great. It's efficient, it's low cost, all of the reasons that you guys know. But for those road trips, for those long drive scenarios, introducing the gas engine, being able to do over 500 miles, it's a game changer. We listen to our customers, recognize that in a lot of off-road applications and a lot of long distance applications, just having to stop the charge is not really ideal. And so we think that this is a game-changing breakthrough for the customer. Now, how we did it, we also really think is interesting, right? So the engine is packaged in the rear. So we still always have the front trunk. We still have always the good parts of being an EV, so to speak. But it comes with the additional confidence of just, again, over 500 miles of range. We think it's quite compelling.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm curious too, have you had a chance to connect with maybe some of the older Scout owners or people who own older Scout vehicles? Perhaps that's a better way to say it. What's been your experience with the Scout community like so far?
Yeah, Greg, this is a really important part of the broader company, is that community orientation. And when we looked at what Scout was and we paid attention to it from 1960 to 1980, and then I would say more specifically from 1980 to 2022, it was a community that kept the flame burning. And there's several layers to it, right? There's sort of the OG resto mod, barn find, like hardcore crew. And we love them, we respect them, we've gotten to know them, we really value their feedback. And then there's a whole nother bigger slice, which is, for lack of better words, call it like the nostalgic connection crew, right? It's people who didn't own one. It's people who aren't looking for carburetors and junkyards, but they recall their grandpa having one, or they learned how to drive on one, or they rode to prom in one. And we love that. We love that as a place to be building from. We think that's just like a really special, authentic, place to build the brand from. Now, so okay, great. We recognize that it's out there. What have we done about it? One of the first things we did as a company, and it was in November 2022, we invited 10 of those Scout OGs to a warehouse in Dallas. If any of them are listening, they'll know who they are. And we showed them a lot of what we're up to. We kind of gave them a peek behind the curtain of the entire company, including showing them what were at the time our earliest full-size design models. And we leaned in, we listened, we sincerely wanted their feedback. They gave us a lot of feedback, some of it a little bit more critical than the others. But we listened, and in many cases, we actually did adapt some things. And so that was in 2022. And then in actually exactly 1 year ago, in 2024, when we showed our show cars off to the world for the first time, we had a lot of those community members there as well. And I think based on their reaction, to hear them kind of hooting and hollering, and to hear their applause when we showed the vehicles, and then to hear their little appreciation for all of the Scout DNA we weaved into the products, that was a really nice affirmation, a nice vote of confidence. And I think we're doing right by the community so far, and the company should be proud of that.
It's interesting how Scout is sort of like a almost below the radar cultural touchstone. Like I've noticed Scouts have been turning up in like sort of novels I've been reading by indie publishers, things like that. I've seen a few of them on the road recently, which is kind of trippy. It almost feels like the resurrection of the company has maybe brought some of these people out of like, wherever they've been, had their vehicles. Maybe just we're noticing it more. Can you talk about, I guess, the challenges of bringing back a brand that was very well known, but then did go away for like 40 years? And there's some companies like Abercrombie, like Indian Motorcycles, a lot of ones that have done this before with sort of a mixed record of success. What are the challenges you think you're going to face here? And, how do you get people who are just interested in a new off-road type thing and they're shopping it or cross-shopping it with like Rivian, a Honda Passport Trail Sport, like a Jeep Wrangler, you name it. How do you connect with those types of folks, I guess?
Yeah. Greg, first I'll address it just from the kind of 30,000 foot trend perspective. And I do think that there's a moment here, and whether it's, I won't name the brands, you can imagine who I'm getting at, whether it's workwear, whether it's sneakers, whether it's record players, there is kind of this push back towards a little bit of authenticity. And that spans across generations. And I do think that there is a certain appreciation and value in knowing that you're buying a product or a brand that's been here before, right? And that they've kind of earned it before. And so I do think Scout can check that box and kind of ride that little bit of cultural zeitgeist that we're in at the moment, that craving for authenticity that we're in at the moment. Now, on the other hand, you do need to be careful that you don't over-index, right? Because we're definitely not like a retro vintage throwback machine. We are innovative as heck. We're cool, modern, safe, right? So it's finding that balance. And, from a strategic perspective, right now we're still telling a little bit of a comeback story, right? If you watch some of our brand assets, if you watch some of our creative campaigns, we lean into that heritage, but we embrace that. We're building something new on top of it. As we look forward and as we get closer to actual building and selling cars to customers, I think that we start to look more and more modern, cool, useful, safe, exciting, just really a vehicle that's fit for the 21st century, but always anchoring on that authenticity and DNA. And, Greg, then since you brought up some competitor products, I think our right to win will be that very sincere connection to combine the best of old world and new world. And our product does have some really interesting old world DNA to it. Yeah. So it's built on a body on frame, increasingly rare. It has this wild, rowdy, solid rear axle that we love, still disconnecting sway bars, optional mechanical 4x4 lockers, real tactile switches on the interior, real door handles, which are becoming quite rare, right? So we're doing some of these kind of old world product choices, which I think the market's actually going to really love and enjoy and has missed over the last few years. But again, at the same time, it's not a retro machine because then it's going to have really great UX. We're going to have really great software. We're going to have these really impressive drive units that can do over right around 1,000 pound-feet of torque. So it's that combination of old and new that I think is really going to uniquely position Scout in the market and allow us to go head-to-head and win.
I just want to add really quickly, talking about seeing Scout around like the older models. I just want to point out that Forza Horizon, which is probably the biggest racing game, has had an international Scout in it for the last few editions, and I remember just being like, oh, well, this is interesting.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate, Ryan, you talking about this combination of authenticity and modern, and talking about body on frame. That, like you said, is an increasingly rare thing, and we've seen more capability from unibody vehicles recently, but still, I mean, when you're properly off-roading, you need that that proper foundation. Do you find, you're talking about the moment of authenticity, do you also find that the last few years, seeing people shift to wanting more of an outdoorsy life, we've seen that since 2020 for reasons we won't get into. Like, do you think that has also really aligned well with this plan on bringing Scout back?
Well, that is definitely one of those other strategic trends that we have been paying very close attention to. And I'm really glad you asked, because I agree. So if trend one is this kind of yearning for authenticity, trend two is that Americans are more active outdoors in building things more than ever before. And you're right, those events in 2020 accelerated that trend, but that was a trend that has been ongoing for decades. And we see it everywhere we can measure it, right? If you look at, for example, national park visitors, or the amount of people on hiking trails, or the amount of people going to fishing holes, or pick your own orchards, or you name it, outside, busier than ever. If you look at sort of where population trends people are moving to and from, America is one of the only countries in the world that is de-urbanizing. Americans are moving out of our mega cities and moving into more mid-sized cities and even small towns, which is quite rare, quite unique. And then the third element is this idea of sort of DIY culture. And, whether it's DIY a house or a trailer or furniture, Americans are simply more hands-on than they've ever been before. And when they do those three things, we are very confident that they need the tool to enable them. We're very confident that they need a more versatile vehicle. And so that is what is really defining a lot of the requirements of Scout, is we want it to be a vehicle for people who are exploring, doing, and making things. Full stop.
We haven't driven any of the Scouts yet. I don't think really anybody has, outside of maybe some of your in-house testers, things like that. Can you kind of preview what that driving experience will be for people who might be interested in, getting on the reservation list, or, what's it going to be like?
We have a really unique potential here. Yeah. And in some ways, we have what I would call a little bit of American off-road rowdiness. Yeah. Body on frame, solid rear axle, up to 35-inch tires from the factory, all the stuff I already said, which in theory, gives you that really rowdy off-road. But then when you pair that with a battery, with really capable drive units, with the range extender, you get like this very precise technical performance orientation to the vehicle as well. So it's really unique. And in some ways, when you look at it, you're like, a vehicle that size and with that capability shouldn't drive that good, that exciting. I drove it for the first time, one of our first test mules last week, and I was like geeking out, because it's very unique in how it combines capability with precision and technicality. It's just a very impressive vehicle. Obviously, I might be a little bit biased, but I'm looking forward to more people getting behind the wheel of it as well.
All right, sounds good. Well, you've been very generous with your time. Kyle, did you want to ask something? Sorry.
I mean, actually, so this might be an interesting one, because usually if we talk to people who work for an OEM, we can guess what's in their garage. But Ryan, what's in your garage?
Yeah, great question.
Well, right now I'm driving an Audi Q7.
Okay.
So that's what's in there. Still a little bit of Volkswagen Group love, and plenty of space for my family, so it works quite well for me at the time.
All right.
Sounds pretty good. Daily driver, pretty comfy.
Yep.
All right. Well, it looks like we're right kind of up against it as far as your allotted time. We really appreciate it. You've been very generous with it. I guess final thoughts, anything we haven't asked you that you would like to throw in here?
I have to do it every time. I always have to shout out the Scout community. We value them I know they're probably going to be listening. We want their feedback. We want to continue to engage with them. And frankly, I just want to thank them for keeping the flame burning. We're going to make it even brighter moving forward. So got to shout out the community and the OGs out there.
I like that. Yeah.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for joining us, Ryan. It's been a great conversation. We can't wait to see what's going on next with Scout.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Greg.
All right.
Thanks so much. All right. That was a pretty informative interview. I think Greg and I are on the same page there. Here on the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. And now we're at the end of the show. And so, Greg, I feel like we haven't caught up in a little bit, even though we've been recording this whole thing. So what have you been in or have driven or are driving soon?
So I just got back from North American Car of the Year testing. I've been out there for the better part of this week. Drove a lot of cool things. I'm actually quite tired. It's just, I feel a little foggy just being on my laptop this morning. Coming up soon, we will have a Prelude first drive. So that's under embargo. I can't tell you right now how it was like, but that will be coming up. And I also I think you drove this car recently, Mercedes-AMG E53, the plug-in hybrid. Just left my driveway. Really liked it. I'm about probably 2/3 of the way through a short piece on that. So those will probably be the next two things you have coming from me.
Excellent. I look forward to it. I'm also going to point out that the wagon version of the E53 is coming, and I feel like that will be the new ultimate journalist.
Oh, man. We're going to have to arm wrestle over that one or do some sort of meet in Windsor and trade it or something. I'm super fired up to get in that one.
Yeah. So I'm also very jealous of Prelude. That's exciting because I'm still quite a ways away from driving that one. So similarly, I know we talked about this before the show, but we never really got around to it. I was also doing some Car of the Year judging. I was at the Automobile Journalists Association of Canada's annual Test Fest, where we collect dozens of cars from across brands. We get journalists from all across the country to fly in, and we spend 2 days driving them and scoring them. I am very fortunate because being where I am, I've driven most of the vehicles already before Test Fest, but there were still some big surprises. When this goes live, you will be able to head to AutoGuide.com and see my first drive review of the Palisade Hybrid. The BMW M2 CS was also there, which was a big shock to all of us because, that thing was just announced pretty recently, like this summer. So those were exciting. The Lucid Gravity was there. People really wanted to get their hands on it. It was a good time. I drove the Mercedes CLE 450 Cabriolet up there, which was excellent. We had a lot of rain at the event, but it was pretty good weather there and back. So I got to drive with the top down, use those air scarfs. It is kind of a unique vehicle in the market in terms of being a proper 4-seat convertible. So that was nice. And then currently I am in the Jeep Wagoneer S, or the Swagoneer, as we like to call it.
There you go.
It's been interesting. I drove it at the beginning of the year, and driving it here on my roads has revealed some good and not so good aspects of the vehicle, but I'll save that for a proper review. And then next week, I'm not driving anything because as of Sunday, when this airs, I will be in Japan at the Japan Mobility Show with Toyota and Lexus. I'm going to be there for almost 2 weeks because while the show takes up a good chunk of the time, I'm also staying there for a little while because I've never been to Japan. So the next episode of the Auto Guide Show will not feature me unless I jump in on a call 13 hours ahead of you guys.
There we go. I guess we'll have to figure that one out. We'll either do early recordings or time travel, one of the two.
Yeah, we've got options here.
We do.
So.
We do. Some more realistic than others.
Slightly. But yeah, that's been this episode of the Auto Guide Show. And yeah, until next time, everyone, have a good week.
eBay has reinvented car buying. From click to curb, everything is covered. Ever try to buy your car online and end up in a parking lot with a stranger on blind trust? That era is over. Now with Secure Purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car, it's where you buy it, start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery, it's all built in. This is the modern way to buy your next ride on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure Purchase is powered by Carmel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary.